Listen up, true crime besties. Today we're going to be taking a look at a movie inspired by an unfortunately very real case involving one of the most horrific things that the world has ever seen. A Slightly Unhinged Woman. Monster is a movie based on the crime spree of the real Aileen Wuornos, often cited as America's first female serial killer by people who apparently don't have access to Google. Aileen's life is a tragic tale from start to end, full of constant failures by a system put in place meant to help protect vulnerable people and the mentally unwell. It really serves as a reminder of what effect constant neglect and suffering can have on a person's psyche, and the things that they'll do to hold on to that brief feeling of love they've been yearning for their entire life. Something which we'll discuss further when taking a look at the real life case of Aileen, but what we know before the movie starts is that she lived an incredibly difficult life, and the movie begins as she's already an adult in 1989 in Florida, on the verge of taking her own life under a bridge after moving from Michigan in search of a better life. But that was Aileen's first mistake, trying to have a better life in Florida. Aileen, who went by Lee, was a prostitute that decided that she wanted to spend her last $5 before she ended it all, considering that she had to do something quite uncomfortable with a person from Florida to acquire it in the first place. So that's when she ends up meeting a woman named Selby in a gay bar. Charlize Theron is completely unrecognizable as Aileen Wuornos, and Christina Ricci is very recognizable as Selby because that's obviously Christina Ricci. But it's no surprise that Charlize was cast in this role due to her ability to go above and beyond for her performances, to the point where she genuinely cut off her own arm to play Furiosa in Mad Max Fury Road. Anyway, gay things at the gay bar, which is much to Lee's surprise as she proceeds to get angry and then physically aggressive when another female would dare touch her. But much like Lee, except in a completely different way, Selby is just a loner with no genuine friends, as she's out hoping to form a genuine connection with something that a therapist told her that she needs to do after forming connections with ghosts. They end up staying at the bar, getting drunk until it closes, and Lee even stays over with Selby for the night as she awkwardly lies next to her in bed. These two women have come from completely different lives. Lee is a homeless prostitute doing whatever she can to survive, and Selby is boring. She comes from a sheltered, religious family, and she's been sent down here to stay with her parents' friends after someone in her local church snitched on her for being one of the gays. But despite this, they both desperately want to feel loved and have an immediate connection, so they meet up later at the local roller rink, where it starts to become apparent that Selby is genuinely infatuated with Lee, someone who their entire life has craved love and admiration from a male, but decides that it's just as good coming from a woman too. I suppose women can be alright. The next day, Lee is out trying to make some money with her customers who want to help a local businesswoman, and with the money she makes for the day, she plans on paying for a room for her and Selby to share for the evening. But while out with one man, he proceeds to become extremely aggressive and hits her in the head with a metal bar, causing her to miss her meetup with Selby. When she comes to, she wakes up covered in her own blood, with her clothes already off. The man plans to violently have his way with her, and perhaps he already has, but while he's distracted, Lee manages to get free from her restraints and reach for the gun in her handbag, followed by the only load getting released right now is the load from the gun directly into the man's body. After getting herself together and realizing what's just happened and what she's just avoided, she opens the man's trunk to find out that not only has she stopped herself from being horrifically abused and assaulted, but she's also saved herself from being cut to pieces with a saw that he was hiding in the back. Taking his money and his car, she goes to the house where Selby is staying, and without telling her the get-rich-quick scheme that she just figured out, she convinces Selby to run off with her in the middle of the night to get that motel room that they wanted to get. And just like that, two people who hardly even know each other agree to stay with each other indefinitely. After what Lee had just experienced, she decides that it's best if she quits hooking and follows life on the straight and narrow for now, and attempts to actually get a real job that hopefully involves a little less killing of human beings. And it seems like Lee genuinely has the best intentions to provide for her new girlfriend in a legitimate manner, but no matter how many job interviews she attends, she's shot down and laughed at for daring to even try to improve her life. And with her old life never too far behind her, she's picked up by the police while out job hunting, as it's a police officer who's previously busted her in the past for selling herself, who's now going to use his position of power to get what he wants from her. She's tried to leave the life, but no matter what she does, the life always finds her. And after she's let go by the police officer for giving him what he wants, she discovers a newspaper which has reported the death of the man that she's killed, saying that the police have no leads in the search for the man's killer. She knows that she's gotten away with it, and even got the opportunity to kill a dirty sex pest in the process. When life gives you lemons. Lee comes home to find Selby crying as she started to panic about leaving her family's friends behind, as she's worrying about how they're going to survive. This is when Lee confesses to Selby that she killed a man, and that's why she quit hooking. But because it's all she's known since she was 13 years old, and having no real luck searching in the job market, she's going to go back to doing what she knows best. And surprisingly, Selby is just kind of alright with that. At this point in time, Lee's intentions are to just go out and make money the way that she's been doing her entire life, but as she's with a customer, he starts to remind her of the man who attacked her, so she proceeds to shoot him in cold blood with his trousers around his ankles. The first life she took was to save her own, but this time around, it was a clear and conscious choice. She may not have originally intended to take the man's life and rob him, but she decided nonetheless, and just like that, her new career is born. She comes home to Selby, happy and excited with a handful of money as well as a new car in the driveway, as Selby is still under the impression that this money has been made with no murderous intentions. Just don't ask about the car though. During the excitement, Lee and Selby proceed to profess their love to each other before making strange mouth noises with each other's tongues. Before meeting Selby, having a life with no purpose, Lee was going to end it all, but now she's found that person and her reason to continue living. So she decides that she is going to continue living, while all of the unlucky men that she's going to meet are not. Soon enough, Lee's made enough money for them to find an actual house to stay at, but in order to fund their new lifestyle, Lee needs to go out hunting. And despite her being someone who seemingly killed the second man for simply nothing more than having a bad memory, she does appear to be someone who still retains some sort of a conscience. As after being picked up by a man who she's waiting to make one bad move so she can justify killing them, it's revealed to be a soft-spoken man with a speech impediment who confesses to never having slept with anyone before. Feeling genuinely sorry for the man, and somewhat annoyed that she can't justify killing him, she allows him to live. An act of mercy, which doesn't last too long, as after being picked up by another man who she presumably kills and robs like she intended to do with the previous man, Selby discovers yet another new car in the driveway. Either Lee's got that cheat code from Grand Theft Auto where you can spawn cars out of thin air, or something more nefarious is going on here. With Selby not truly understanding the full nature of where these cars and wads of cash are coming from, she heads out in one of the victim's cars, unaware that it leads directly back to a murdered man. And upon finding out about this, Lee gets into an argument with her before heading out to blow some steam, by blowing some more men's heads off. Whether Selby had suspicions and just didn't want to confront them, sooner or later she's going to be hit with the harsh reality of where these things are coming from. And after having a bit of a woman driver moment and crashing into absolutely nothing, Lee tells her that they have to make a run for it, before noticing that a nearby elderly couple has already seen their faces. So after taking the car away, she explains to Selby that the car actually belongs to a dead man, and now they need to abandon it. After going home, Lee then proceeds to show Selby a box of newspaper clippings which report on the mysterious murders of multiple different men, all men that Lee has been killing to fund their lifestyle. Before, whether Selby didn't know or just didn't want to know, now she's come face to face with the reality of things and can no longer act like an innocent bystander. Lee then attempts to gaslight Selby into thinking that she's known all along, despite Lee not telling her all along, but I guess all of the signs have been there. The new cars, the new money, the new concept of apparently being a naive idiot. Lee justifies her actions by saying that people kill each other all the time for politics and religion, and she's just cleaning up the streets by taking horrific abusers off them. Except in reality, she only knew the first one had genuine horrible intentions, and all the others were just a means to an end for her. She finishes off her nice little confession by telling Selby how much of a good person she is, right after telling Selby how not good of a person she is, which somehow manages to work, and she convinces Selby to stick with her and her new business venture under the guise of them having a future together. Every money-making venture needs a good system, and Lee's is no different. She lures men out into the woods, gets them to leave the car and walk deeper into the woods on foot, and then executes them out there as to not get any blood on her brand new car. A system which seems to go well for Lee, until she realizes that one of the men that she's just put into early retirement is actually a police officer, and everybody knows that police aren't really that fussed when you kill random horny men, but if you kill one of their own, then maybe they'll slightly do something about it if they can be bothered to. Her grand plan of lezzing out and shooting dudes is starting to fall apart, as after coming home to tell Selby what went wrong, Selby proceeds to tell her to head back out there and find someone else so they can get a new car to make their escape. And after being pimped out by her own girlfriend, we then see that the police have started narrowing in on them, as the elderly couple who witnessed their impeccable driving skills confirm with the police that the sketches they're being shown are the two women that they saw in their front yard. Afraid, stressed and intoxicated, Lee is then picked up by Herschel from The Walking Dead, but he isn't interested in her services and only picked her up at the side of the road out of the goodness of his heart, as he genuinely wants to help her. And just like with that one previous man, she can't convince herself to kill him for that, which is until she drunkenly attempts to leave his car and accidentally drops her gun right in front of him. She may not have intended to kill him, but now it's too late, as unfortunately for them, they don't live in a country where it's completely normal for people to carry guns. Because of this, she drives him out to a secluded spot and executes him as he cries, talking about his wife and his pregnant daughter. Their sketches are broadcast over the TV, and it's apparent that their little money-making endeavour has come to an end. So being the caring and loving person that she is, wanting to protect Selby, Lee sends her back to live with her parents. And shortly after, Lee is arrested by undercover officers in a bar, with one of them being played by Kane Hodder, meaning that Lee was literally arrested by Jason Voorhees, as only he's allowed to kill people with trousers around their ankles. While in jail, she talks to Selby over the phone, but realises by the way that Selby is speaking, Selby is actually working with the police to try and get a confession out of her. And genuinely loving Selby, Lee agrees to take the fall for it by admitting to it all, with Selby even proceeding to testify against her in court. Lee is found guilty of capital murder and tells the judge to rot in hell for sentencing a raped woman to death, conveniently forgetting about all of the little murders she committed. And for the movie, that's where this dark and twisted love story, which helps create sympathy towards the main character, comes to an end. But unfortunately, as we've discovered with these types of videos in the past, it's creating sympathy for a very real person who committed these very real crimes. And you don't exactly need to go far online either to find people expressing their support for Aileen, as unfortunately, she really was a product of her twisted surroundings. But ultimately, these were real lives taken, many of which were people who wanted to cause her no harm. But living a life constantly exposed to the absolute worst of what humanity has to offer is certainly going to have negative effects on a person's brain development and could potentially cause them to start viewing people as expendable, as they already see them as people who don't deserve to live anyway. The real-life Aileen Carol Wuornos was born February 29th in 1956, and to say that she had it rough is like saying the British royal family is full of pedophiles. An understatement. Aileen's mother Diane was only 14 years old when she married an 18-year-old man, and 2 years later when she was 16, she would give birth to Aileen. But only 4 years after that, Diane would abandon her children, leaving them with their alcoholic grandparents, as apparently she thought she was winning the What Not to Do with Your Kids competition. Aileen's life had been in a constant downward spiral since the day that she was born, and before she'd even reached her teenage years, she'd begun engaging in sexual activity with boys and men in her neighbourhood in exchange for things like cigarettes, drugs and food. A witness at one of her trials later on was a young boy who grew up in the same neighbourhood as her and who was apparently dating Aileen at some point when they were children, but when other people were around, he would pretend not to know her and throw rocks at her and call her obscenities. This very same person also claimed that she was having sexual relations with her own brother around this time, and then around the time that Aileen was 13 years old, her grandmother would pass away from liver failure, followed by her own grandfather kicking her out onto the streets and forcing her to live in the woods for multiple years at only 13 years old, where she would then resort to selling her body to men in order to keep herself alive. And if things weren't already horrific enough for her, after 14 years of abandonment, sexual abuse and violence at the hands of her caregivers, Aileen would become pregnant after apparently being abused by a family friend, before her child would be given to a home for unwed mothers. So, at 16 years old, Aileen would decide to move away from her own personal hell and head down to Florida. The other hell. In Florida, she would continue making money the only way that she knew how to, while at one point actually briefly getting married to a 76-year-old man named Louis Fell, who she would make fall by beating him with his own walking stick only 9 weeks after their marriage, resulting in it being annulled. In between moving to Florida and the events of the movie are multiple arrests for robberies, assault, car thefts and forgeries, and multiple attempts for her to end everything, with one of them involving her shooting herself in the stomach while only 22 years old. Living in Florida will do that to a person. And apparently it turns you gay as well, as in 1986, while 30 years old, Aileen would meet a 24-year-old named Tyria Moore, the real-life version of Selby. And unlike the brevity of their relationship in the movie, the pair would actually live together for 3 years, as Aileen would provide for them while working her day job. But it would all change in 1989, when she would commit her first killing with the death of Richard Mallory, an electronics store owner. A person who, much like in the movie, she claimed to have beaten and raped her, resulting in Aileen taking his life in what she would say was self-defense. Something which actually doesn't seem all that far-fetched once you take into account this man had previously been arrested for attempted rape. It may have started as an act of necessity to save her own life, but it quickly sparked an idea in her head. one of not too many apparently. Her next victim would be a construction worker named Daniel Spears, whose naked body was discovered along a highway with 6 bullet wounds. Next would be a man named Charles Carskadon, a part-time rodeo worker who would be discovered with 9 bullet holes while wrapped in an electric blanket. Then a man named Peter Seams, whose body would actually never be discovered, but Aileen's fingerprints would be found inside the man's abandoned car. Troy Burress, who had the best job title, a sausage salesman, would be found in the woods with 2 bullet wounds. Then, former police chief and retired United States Air Force Major Charles Humphreys would be found fully clothed with 7 different bullet wounds, as well as Walter Antonio, a reserve police officer, who would be found naked with 4 bullet wounds. The problem with Aileen's method is that murder is actually completely fine unless it's committed against a police officer. People then start to take notice of what was going on, and much like in the movie, Aileen and Tyria were involved in a crash while driving a victim's car, which resulted in a witness being able to describe what they looked like to police officers. Aileen would pawn off some of the belongings taken from her victims, resulting in the police being able to get her fingerprints, as she'd already been arrested in Florida, thus already having her fingerprints on the system. And ultimately, much like in the movie, Aileen would be arrested at a bar under an old warrant that she had for her no-good activities, followed by Tyra agreeing to get a confession from Aileen in exchange for her own immunity, because despite being a lesbian, she did not want to go to the only place on Earth surrounded by nothing but women. So with the help of Tyra, Aileen would be convicted of Mallory's murder, the man from the original attack, who in the movie attacked her first. She would then plead no contest to the murders of Charles Richard Humphreys, Troy Eugene Burress, and David Andrew Spears, before then confessing to the murders of Charles Edmund Carkston and Walter Antonio, something which she would ultimately be sentenced to 6 death penalties for, where they kill you and revive you again until your sentence is up.
I'll be up in heaven while y'all rotting in hell. In the ass one of these days.
Throughout all of this, she was adamant that all of these killings were done in self-defense, and that all of these men had attempted to cause her harm, with it only seeming like the first victim, Mallory, being the one who actually intended to do something due to his previous track record. But like a modern-day cryptocurrency rug puller, it sparked an idea in her head to steal as much money as possible, while absolutely screwing everyone else involved. And after spending many years on Florida's death row, with it becoming ever more apparent to her that she was never going to get out from this, eventually she would confess to Nick Broomfield for his documentary, Life and Death of a Serial Killer, that she had in fact just killed all of those men in order to rob them and leave no witnesses, and if she was ever let out, she would kill again. It seemed like after a long time on death row, with various complaints about the prison guards and the media attempting to make her go crazy, Aileen had had enough and simply wanted to die, just like she did before she met Tyra. But when she thought the cameras were off while still talking to Nick, she whispered to him that it was in self-defense, but she just couldn't stand being kept in a corrupt system where she'd already been sitting for 10 years by this point.
Was it self-defense?
Yes, but I can't tell anybody.
Enough was enough for her, and with there now being no defense whatsoever, by saying plain and simple that she did it and will do it again, on October 9th, 2002, she would be executed by lethal injection. Despite Tyra being the one who helped sentence her to death, Aileen would still tell people right up until the very end that she still loved her. She found that love that she was so desperately yearning for and would never let it go. Aileen lived a horrifically disturbing life and would go on to do horrifically disturbing things herself. What happened in her past is certainly no excuse for what she would go on to do to other people, but it does highlight the very real pattern of hurt people hurting other people. Maybe things would have turned out a lot different if she hadn't been failed by literally everyone around her from such a young age. Or maybe not, and we'll never know. So before this video comes to an end, I'd like to just give a big shout out and a massive thank you to all of the YouTube members and patrons, the people who every month continue to go out of their way to help support the channel. If you're interested in becoming a YouTube member or patron yourself, not only are you just generally being a great support, but you also get access to a few little perks, like being able to join the private Discord server, where you can then get links to all uncensored versions of videos. Starting off with this week's new YouTube signups, a massive thank you to Yolo Ono, Matt Weaver, Omar Contreras, Jimmy Mack, Simps, It's Leaky, Thomas Polchalski, Luger Schluger, Gigashot, Drag320 on 05, Matthew Green, Robin West, Stephen L, Nick Bladikas, Mazzolo 4.0, Fernando Osorio, The Prairie Road, Cameron Kelly, Rufals, Nicola Lee Baker, Ainfac Cody, Jan Ventura, Miss Mercury, Mob1, Totally Not Noah, Myth, Vampira, No Name, Crotexable, Wes Perry, Akella, Zaza Lord, Edward Q, Swiss Lobster, Adam Boswell, The Soldier 420, Het Nakani, Francisco Cardenas Martin, Almost Anything, Mai, Brige, Hestia, Luna Is Yours, Rickboy365, Ashley Taylor, KST, Young Yokai, Travesta 100, Broccoli Boy, Skirt Reynolds, Kale Owen, Sebastian Provest, U2, Quilks VT, Ruben F04, Joshua Davis, Fundy25, Dre Azak, Ananana, B Moose, Stinkbug, Pixel Gaming, Sky Panda, and N Masters. Now moving over to this week's new Patreon signups, a massive thank you to Cam Asbill, Henrik, Stove, Lugal, The Mango, Jack Lahan, Robert Nebby, Alex Howard, Helen Swindlehurst, Shadows Nick, Jordan, Jimmy Allen, Steve Richardson, Livers, Anthony Reyes, Ethan Rode, Rat Mari, Lou Bird, Darez, Nico Joe, Clayton Shipley, Michael Myers, Addison Diaz, Austin Diaz, Grave Robber, Sebastian Paul, Cosmic, George Ortega, Wes Perry, Sapuku, Sapphire, Valentine Soup, James David, Christian Bassinger, Alexander Benny, Trey Howard, SKSR, Horpia, Selena, Gaming Chefs, Tia Lilly, Jocelyn LaForce Regley, Sammy Wiazi65, Cameron, Gene Martin, Acronics, Sven Russell, Avin Flang, Another J, Matthew H56, Noah D. Greenberg, Keegan Manoz, Ashton James, Hess, Liam Good, Major Numeros, Bailey Turner, Anabolic Jesus, Nihilus, Mostly Ghost Host, Habdi DeBarge, Max Naxton, Layla W, Ann Moyes, Matt, Sebastian Cruz Painter, Cancerous Nut, and Caden Petrino. So once again, a big shout out to all of the YouTube members and patrons, and a big thank you to everyone else for watching.